In 2011, the last Lincoln Town Car rolled off the assembly line in St. Thomas, Ontario, and Ford closed the factory behind it. There was no replacement waiting, no next-generation platform in development, no concept car promising a return. For more than 30 years, the Town Car had been one of the most visible automobiles in America, parked at airports, idling outside hotels, moving quietly through suburban neighborhoods where buyers chose comfort over flash. And when it disappeared, Ford offered nothing in its place. That silence was not unique. Across Detroit, manufacturer after manufacturer had been walking away from the full-size American sedan, the same kind of car that had built their dealership networks, earned family loyalty for generations, and carried this country down every interstate it ever paved. These are 8 great sedans that Detroit killed. The real question is not why each one disappeared. The question is why Detroit never built anything to take their place. The Town Car occupied a position in American life that no other sedan could quite duplicate. It was simultaneously a luxury automobile, a livery vehicle, a fleet workhorse, and a personal car for buyers who value deep seats and a quiet ride over European sport tuning. By the early 2000s, Lincoln was selling tens of thousands every year, and a significant share went to commercial buyers, limousine operators, corporate fleets, and car services that depended on its durability. Ford looked at those numbers and saw a problem. The Panther platform underneath the Town Car dated to 1979. Updating it would cost billions. And the profit margins were lower than what Ford expected from the crossovers and sport utility vehicles it wanted to build instead. So the Town Car was retired. Ford promised that younger buyers would come to Lincoln through smaller, more modern vehicles on shared platforms. Most of them never arrived, and the limousine companies that had kept Town Cars running for 300,000 miles simply moved on, some to Cadillac, some to imports, and some out of business entirely. Ford had eliminated its most loyal customer base in pursuit of one that didn't exist yet. But Ford was not the only manufacturer making that kind of trade. General Motors had spent decades building the most layered sedan hierarchy in the American market. Chevrolet at the bottom, then Pontiac, then Oldsmobile, then Buick, then Cadillac at the top. Each brand offered a full-size sedan, and each one occupied a carefully defined price position. The Oldsmobile 98 lived near the top of that middle ground, a large, quiet, well-appointed car positioned just below Cadillac in prestige. For professional families who wanted something better than a Buick but weren't ready for a DeVille, the 98 was the answer. But by the 1990s, General Motors had allowed its divisions to share so many platforms, engines, and body panels that customers could no longer explain what made an Oldsmobile different from a Buick or a Pontiac. The 98 was discontinued after 1996. Oldsmobile itself was dead by 2004. The sedan hadn't failed. The brand carrying it had been hollowed out from the inside until there was nothing left to save. And if General Motors was willing to erase one of the oldest names in the American automobile industry, the question became obvious. Which division was next? The answer came faster than most people expected. Pontiac had built the Bonneville as something most General Motors sedans were not. A full-size car with genuine personality. It was larger than a Grand Prix, more expressive than anything Buick offered. And for years, it combined highway comfort with enough available performance to keep Pontiac distinct in a corporate lineup that was rapidly losing its distinctions. But Pontiac suffered from the same identity collapse that had destroyed Oldsmobile. Shared platforms, overlapping price ranges, a corporate parent that couldn't justify 6 brands fighting over 4 customer segments. When General Motors entered bankruptcy in 2009, Pontiac was eliminated entirely. The Bonneville had already been discontinued in 2005, but the brand's death made its absence permanent. 2 General Motors divisions were gone. Their full-size sedans had vanished with them. And by now, the losses were forming something larger than a list of discontinued models. Because General Motors was not only losing full-size sedans by losing entire divisions, it was also killing them inside divisions that survived. The Fleetwood Brougham had been Cadillac's most traditional large sedan. Body-on-frame, rear-wheel drive, long and formal, with a road presence that communicated exactly what Cadillac had represented for most of the 20th century. General Motors discontinued it after 1996, steering Cadillac towards smaller, front-wheel drive platforms that management believed would attract younger buyers. The Seville and the DeVille were competent cars. But for the customer who understood Cadillac as a formal, commanding automobile that filled a lane, the new lineup felt like a concession to something other than luxury. General Motors was not responding to a market that had rejected the Fleetwood. It was reshaping its own brand to fit a corporate platform strategy and hoping the customer would follow. The customer who wanted a big, traditional Cadillac had nowhere left to go. But the deeper problem was becoming clear. This wasn't just about taste. It was about money. The Roadmaster strips away every remaining excuse. Reintroduced in 1991 on the General Motors full-size rear-wheel drive platform, it delivered exactly what its name promised. A large sedan powered by a 260-horsepower LT1 VAV8. With a ride built for crossing entire states without fatigue. Automotive journalists praised it. Owners were loyal to the point of devotion. And General Motors cancelled it in 1996, not because the car failed, but because the company wanted the Arlington, Texas assembly plant building Suburbans and Tahoes instead. By this point, the pattern was impossible to ignore. These sedans were not being killed because nobody wanted them. They were being abandoned because trucks and sport utility vehicles generated higher profit per unit, and every dollar spent engineering a full-size sedan was a dollar that wasn't flowing toward the vehicles Wall Street rewarded. Detroit had not discovered that the sedan was obsolete. It had discovered that the sedan was less profitable, and in the boardroom, that distinction didn't matter. What remained to be seen was whether the name alone could survive, even after the car behind it was gone. The Impala answered that question, and the answer was painful. Few nameplates carried more weight in American automotive history. The Impala had been Chevrolet's signature full-size sedan since 1958, a symbol of accessible prosperity, of families moving into the middle class and buying a car that proved it. General Motors discontinued the name in 1985, brought it back in 2000, and kept it alive through 2020. But the car that wore the badge after its return was a front-wheel drive sedan built on a shared platform, competent, anonymous, and absent of everything that had once made the Impala name mean something. It was transportation. It was no longer an Impala in any way that connected to the car Americans remembered. Detroit had learned that you could keep selling the name long after you stopped building the car. Whether that counted as survival depended entirely on what you thought the name was supposed to represent. Ford, meanwhile, had taken a different path and held on longer than anyone. The Crown Victoria was the last full-size, body-on-frame, rear-wheel drive American sedan in continuous production. Police departments depended on it. Taxi operators ran them past 300,000 miles. Government fleets ordered them by the thousands. And private buyers, many of them older Americans, who simply wanted a big, durable, affordable sedan, kept purchasing them long after Ford stopped advertising them to the general public. The Crown Victoria wasn't glamorous. It didn't win design awards. But it did something no other American sedan still could. It worked year after year, without apology. Ford discontinued it in 2011, the same year the town car disappeared, and offered no rear-wheel drive sedan to replace it. Police departments scrambled. Fleet managers searched for alternatives that didn't exist. And a car that had been part of the American landscape for decades was simply gone. If any single vehicle seemed like the final proof that Detroit had abandoned the full-size sedan, the Crown Victoria was it. But there was one more name, and its story revealed something the others had only suggested. The Caprice had been the full-size American sedan in its purest form. Spacious, comfortable, simple to repair. Designed to carry a family and everything they owned across 1,000 miles of highway without complaint. For millions of Americans, the Caprice was the car in the driveway before anyone thought to call it classic. The sedan that took families to church, to the lake, across state lines in July, with the windows down and the bench seat holding 3 across. General Motors built them by the hundreds of thousands, and in 1996, General Motors stopped. The full-size rear-wheel drive platform was gone. The factory was converted. The sedan that had once been Chevrolet's backbone was surrendered without ceremony. When General Motors revived the Caprice name in 2011, What arrived was an Australian-built, Holden-derived police sedan sold exclusively to law enforcement, a capable patrol car, but one that shared almost nothing with the vehicle whose name it carried. No dealer sales, no family buyers, no connection to the automobile that had defined the segment. The name came back. The car did not. 8 sedans, 5 brands, 2 of which no longer exist. Not one was replaced by a vehicle that carried the same philosophy, the same commitment to space, comfort, durability, and the quiet confidence of a full-size American automobile. Detroit did not lose these cars to foreign competition, government regulation, or public disinterest. It chose to stop building them because the margins were better somewhere else. The factories went to trucks. The platforms went to sport utility vehicles. And the customers, millions of Americans who simply wanted a large, affordable, rear-wheel drive sedan, were left with nothing from the manufacturers they had trusted for generations. The sedans survived in driveways, at car shows, and in the memories of everyone who rode in them. The corporations moved on. The cars, somehow, did not. If you could bring back one of these sedans exactly as it was, the body-on-frame construction, the V8, the bench seat, the ride, which one would it be? The quiet dignity of the town car, or the family road trip honesty of the Caprice? Drop your answer in the comments, especially if one of these cars was once parked in your family's driveway. And if you believe these lost chapters of American automotive history deserve to be remembered, subscribe to the Forgotten Motors.